Welcome to Today, Plan Tomorrow. I am Auntie Poluke with Hand in Hand Consulting, and this is where we talk about money, not just the math, but the mindset, the habits, and the heart behind how we spend, save, and steward what we've been given. Today, I'm sitting with Mercdes Bohr, a mechanical and electrical engineer by trade, working as a test engineer who relocated from Michigan to California to work at Rocket Lab. We're talking about what it actually costs to relocate financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Relocate, leaving everything familiar. Recalibrate, adjusting finances and finding community. Rebuild, establishing stability as a single professional in one of the most expensive states. Yes, California. Mercdes, welcome to the podcast. Let's talk about how to relocate, recalibrate, and rebuild.
Well, nice
So,
to be here.
absolutely. Please do tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Mercedes Bohr, originally from Michigan. I got the opportunity to move out here almost 2 years ago now to work at Rocket Lab. SoCal is not originally one of the places I saw myself living, but the opportunity came up and I said, why not?
Why not? That is always the right answer. When you said, why not? I have a feeling that there was a lot more to it than just that simple question. You didn't just say, why not? And you just up and left, right? So tell us a little bit of a background. What caused that opportunity to come up? And why was your response, why not?
Yeah, so I had left my previous job in September of 2023, and I had decided I needed to take some time just to kind of reset. I had gotten very burnt out, and I decided I need some time off of work just to focus on my mental health, get things in order, then I can go back. And I started looking for jobs around end of October, beginning of November that year, and I looked in Michigan, out of Michigan. I looked, it felt like everywhere. Um, and I ended up filling out over 60 job applications over the course of months. And in the meantime, I was working as a substitute teacher during the day, McDonald's at night, and on weekends to try to still pay my bills and scheduling interviews and applying to jobs any free time I had. And I kept getting rejected. And so after months and months of trying, two job opportunities came up at the same time. One was with Rocket Lab and one was with another company in Texas. And I said, okay, well, now I have to decide California or Texas. And just throughout the interview process, I got a better feeling from Rocket Lab. They pursued me. The other company, I felt like I really had to constantly be checking in with them and asking them. And so I just felt a lot more wanted by Rocket Lab and their response times were quick. So for me, I was like, this gives me a better feeling already. And I decided if I was going to move to another state between Texas and California, I would rather be in California. So I said, so SoCal wasn't exactly where I was looking, but I said, you know what? These are the first two opportunities that came up. This seems like the better option. So that's what I'm going with.
Hence the why not? I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, that is awesome. And especially to have a positive outlook about a situation like that. I'm also a firm believer in asking for wisdom when you have options that are not exactly polar opposites. Both would be
Yeah.
okay, right? So, like, which one? And then you let the Holy Spirit guide you in that direction. You found yourself in California. Are you liking it so far? And how long have you been here officially?
I've been here a little less than 2 years. It'll be 2 years in May. And I like parts of it. So there are some things about Michigan I really, really miss having
Okay.
moved out here. But there are some things that I'm really glad to have gained access to out here. I see it as very much a mixed bag. I wouldn't say like, oh, Michigan is so much better or California is so much better. I think they just have different things that are better.
For those people who grew up in California and know nothing about Michigan, can you give us one or two things that you miss about Michigan?
So in terms of where I was living in Michigan, what I miss is that it was quiet. You could actually see the stars at night. I could ride my bike from my house to like three different mountain biking trail systems and plenty of paved trails, right? And Granted, the mountain biking trails are not the same level as out here. Yes, I understand that. But the fact is, I didn't have to drive to a trail. I could just ride
Mm.
to the trail. And so for me, I just felt a lot more free to just ride my bike a lot of places and move about. Where here, I just feel like it's so it's so packed here. I feel like it's a lot harder just to move out
Yeah.
here than it was in Michigan a bit. Also, I miss the seasons. I know Californians love between 60 and 80 degrees, and that's where you guys live, but I love fall. I love all the colors of fall and how crisp the air gets.
Oh my goodness. I thought you were gonna say the best thing was the weather, but you missed the seasons. And I have to tell you, after experiencing seasons in other states with the colors changing, the trees changing, things changing, I completely get it. I get it. But I also love the 60 to 80. It can't be 60, honestly. Yeah, you're definitely from Michigan. It's gotta be 70. 60 is still too cold. All right. So, what was it like officially relocating? To walk us through that experience.
Yeah, so when I got the offer, signed it, said, "Okay, this is it. I'm moving out here." I told them I need a month. Because what happened was for substitute teaching, you don't really have to quit as much as you just stop taking jobs. But for McDonald's, I had to quit. So put in my notice, and then I flew out here to look at apartments because I had only been out here once for my final interview. So I had no clue. So I came out here for I think a couple days just to look at as many places as I could. And then when I went back, it started the packing. So I lived in a rental house by myself for less money than I now share a 2-bedroom apartment for. So deciding, okay, what am I going to take with me? And so part of that decision was I had decided to sign a lease where I would have a room in a condo. So all the kitchen and like living room furniture that was already there. I just needed to bring stuff for my bedroom. So I was like, okay, so I had to get rid of my furniture, which I'd already gotten for free. So I just gave it back to Salvation Army because other people had given it for me for free. So I just gave it away. And then I had to decide, okay, so all of like my kitchen stuff, I'm gonna want eventually. I said I'm gonna come back for it when I live by myself again. But for now, stuff had to go to my parents' house to be stored there. And luckily, I had already used my time when I wasn't working at all to organize, declutter, get rid of a lot of stuff. So I had already downsized enough. And I said, okay, well, whatever is not getting thrown out or donated or going to my parents is coming with me. And I drive a truck. So I just loaded up my truck and I said, all right, whatever fits, it fits. And that's what I'm taking with me. And so
Okay.
I spent a week and a half to do that whole process and to say all my goodbyes that I could, and then started driving.
It sounds like you actually had a really good process. Like you thought it
Yeah.
through, you carried it out. It didn't sound overly complicated, leaving the jobs that you had, exploring California before you made the big leap, and then also not doing anything drastic, like literally settling with a bedroom in a condo, right? Until you felt situated. Is that why you chose that living situation?
Yeah, well, so at the time I did not have a lot of money. My finances were very bad, and I needed money to give the security deposit. So I took my old security deposit from my house and essentially handed it over for the new place, and I had a little bit of extra money. And my company was going to give me money to move, but I wasn't going to get it till my first or second paycheck. And so for me, I was like, all right, I don't really have a lot of money to like, rent a U-Haul, drive it across, cause like however many days that would take, right? And so I said, okay, for me, maybe just it's easier just to go to a place where I don't have to bring a ton. I can get settled there. I can financially recover from the hole I dug myself into while not working. Like I had savings, but I ran out of those, right? And so, and as glamorous as it seems, substitute teaching at McDonald's don't really make enough to pay a whole lot. And at the time, I was still paying student loans. So I said, okay, I'm just going to stay here for a while because it was month to month to get some more financial stability. Then I can kind of get to know the area, find
Right.
a place I want to be. and then I can move in there, and then that's when I can fly back, rent a U-Haul, drive anything else that I want to bring with me, right? Or I just buy new furniture out here, which like I did eventually buy furniture because I ended up leaving that place and moving in with a roommate to a different apartment, and I just got my furniture from Salvation Army, and it's just as good as what I had before.
But taking it in stages. So I am curious, even with all of the advanced planning, because it sounds like you thought this all the way through and didn't just take a leap without calculating. Even with that, was there a difference with what you thought the relocation would cost and the reality after the dust was settled?
I don't know if I really knew how much it would cost ahead of time. Because believe it or not, I did not plan my road trip out here. My parents kept asking me, "So, like, so what are you gonna do? How are you like, what route are you gonna take? Where are you gonna stay? Do you have your hotels booked?" And I was like, "Nope, we'll just kinda see what happens." And so, um, I used it also as an opportunity to see some friends. So, for instance, the first day, I didn't drive very far. I went to Chicago and stayed with a friend. And then I used Hotel Tonight. A friend told me about that app, which is like you can book hotels that day and they give you cheap rates or they give you discounts or something like that. So I would just look at a map and I was like, okay, yeah, sure, this is about where I want to go. So I ended up staying at one outside of St. Louis, one that was like halfway through Kansas, where besides a hotel, the only things at that station were like at that stop were like a gas station and a Sonic and an IHOP, and like that was it. I stayed with a friend in Colorado, an aunt in Sedona, and then I made it out here, right? So I was like, you know, that works. And, I'm not going to eat anything super extravagant. So I figured just do things as cheaply as possible to get out there and I'll just figure it out when I get out there. So I knew I had to keep it under the amount um that I was given for relocating. So like my first trip out here, I used up all my hotel points and
Okay.
used up any like Sky Miles to help get me out here. And I think when I did the math at the end, I was given 7,000 to move out here, and I think I spent 4,000, so I pocketed
Wow.
3,000.
All right. So it's almost like they gave you a budget.
Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
you came well under that budget because you kept everything really low cost, including driving instead of flying and making a trip out of it, visiting friends and taking the long route to see things and just enjoy the experience, which is great. It's not like you're going to do that
yeah.
trip every year, right?
No, I'm not gonna drive that trip every year. Like, driving across Nebraska and Kansas, well, actually, I didn't drive across Nebraska at that time. I drove through Missouri and Kansas, and I think that was the most boring part of the drive. It was just nothing as far as you could see. No offense to those states. Like, but at least like the route I took, nothing. And so, but for me, I was actually really looking forward to, so I made a week trip out of it. And I was looking forward to it because I had been working two jobs and interviewing like crazy for months, right? And so for me, I was like, this is my vacation.
Mm.
And my dad wanted to come with me, which is really sweet, but I was like, "No, no, I am doing this by myself. I'm not taking anyone else into account here. I just want my week of just me and stopping when I want to stop and staying where I want to stay." And so for me, I saw it as a little mini vacation before I started.
Very cool. Very, very good. Now, what about recalibrating? Once you got here, was it just you hit the ground running with work, with what other areas of your life did you just like run off with? Or did you actually have to take some time to adjust?
I had to take some time. Well, so I got here on a Friday night and I started work the following Monday. And work was a bit hard of an adjustment because I hadn't worked as an engineer for 8.5 months before starting this job. And the work I was doing here, I hadn't done in 2.5 years. It was like two jobs ago. And what I did then did not really prepare me as well as I would have liked for the work I'm doing now. And so there were a lot of ways in which when I started, just went home feeling like my brain was so heavy and hurt so much, and I just felt completely inadequate. And which, granted, anytime you start a new job, there's going to be a learning curve, right? That's expected. But I was new to the job. I already had limited experience and I was new to the industry. So there's a lot of things people took for granted in a language people spoke that I was sitting there very confused for a lot of those conversations. So for me, I just took it easy and I said, I'm not going to rush out to do a whole lot. And originally for church, I had decided to take a break. Whenever I left Michigan, I was already not feeling super great about church. And I said, this is a nice clean break. This is a time for me just to take some time off. But a couple of people had told me about a church out here. And so I went to go check it out. And one of the pastors there comes up to me, and I'd sat in the back on purpose. I figured I'd go in, say I had been, leave, maybe do that one other time just to tell my friends, hey, I went to the church you suggested. It was all right. I'm still going to take a break. But one of the pastors there, she saw me and she said, you look young. And I said, thank you. And she said, you look like you're in your 20s. I said, "Yes." And she said, okay, well, there's a group of young adults. So let me introduce you. And at the time, they were just playing pickleball on Monday nights. So I was like, never played pickleball, but why not?
Why not?
Let's just see how this goes. And so that's how I started going to that church and getting more involved just because I was like, for me, I'm like, I don't know if these people are going to be my best friends. I don't know if we're even going to be good friends. I don't know if this church is going to go anywhere like with me. But I was like, I could shop around a bunch of churches, or I can just find one that these people seem okay and I can just run with it. So that's what I did. And then I sat next to someone at work who plays soccer and he had talked about it. And I said, oh, is it people from Rocket Lab? Like, can I join? Because I'm new here. I want to meet people. And he said, actually, it's people from my last company, but you can still join. So he invited me to play with his team. And I asked, is this a competitive team or is this a like we're here to chill team? Because if you're a competitive team, you want me nowhere near that field. Because the last time I played soccer, pretty sure I was in middle school. So he said, he said, no, we are not a competitive team at all. So just come play. And I was like, okay, cool. So I figured again, I don't know if these guys are going to be best friends, good friends, or if they're just going to be people I see once a week to play soccer. But either way, like, why not just try it? If anything, I learned a new sport in the process.
Pickleball, soccer, but both have allowed you to create a community and maybe friendships. Is that the result
Yes,
of the experience?
I would say so.
Okay. So, what came of it? What came of your pickleball church experience and your soccer ball that's with a colleague, but other company friends as well?
Yeah, so for soccer, showed up most weeks, but this fall we kind of disbanded. We couldn't get enough people to consistently go. And it was that company that sponsored us. And we were like, we don't feel right having a company like pay our registration if we can't get enough people here every week to have a team? And so that was kind of a bummer that it fizzled out like that. But for the time that I was playing, it was a lot of fun. And I didn't really see those. I don't think I really saw anyone outside of soccer. But when we played, it was fun and it was good. And if I got the chance to play with those guys again, sure. And then for church, that was a little bit longer of the story, but it started out pretty good once because eventually summer came to an end, or what Californians call summer. To me, this is always summer. But we so it transitioned more into Bible study, and at some point, I got asked to join leadership by one of the pastors and by two of the other leaders and young adults. I was incredibly hesitant because I understand leadership's a big responsibility. I had never really led anything before, but I said, you know what? Why not? Let's just see how this goes. And so it it was rough. I mean, out of that experience, I've gained some close friends, and I'm super grateful for the friendships I have gained. And I worked very hard to build relationships with people outside of that young adult group. And I also ended up kind of getting roped into the production team just because one time someone asked me to help after church to break down because we were meeting in a hotel. We didn't have our own building. And then the next thing you know, the head of that team is texting me saying, hey, welcome to the team. Like, we're happy to have you for setup and tear down. And I was like,
Did you get voluntold?
okay, kind of. But I was like, I was like, okay, sure, whatever. I'm okay with waking up early. I know you guys need help because I think there were only 3 people doing setup at that time. And like 2 of them, they would talk about, oh, my bad back or my bad leg. And I'm like, okay, I'm young. I'm able to get up early. I can help you guys lift things and move things. Sure, why not?
Very, very cool. Okay, so you've had some really great experiences. What would you say are some key takeaways when it comes to recalibrating and transitioning, whether for work or for church or for friendships?
So I think in general, I always say that in every situation in life, there is something for you to teach and there's something for you to learn. And I think you just have to be on the lookout for it because sometimes you can learn things from the most unlikely source. Like I remember at a Bible study one time, and it was a Bible study that had people from 19 to I think the oldest at the time was 37. This is before I came to California. And I remember talking about something really hard and someone who was really making life difficult for me. And we prayed for each other. And the person who prayed for me, he was 19. And he prayed for what I wanted him to, but then he also prayed for the person who was making life difficult for me. And I remember going, oh, well, that's right. I should probably be praying for them instead of just being like perpetually angry with them. Maybe I should pray for them. And he wasn't sitting there trying to teach me a lesson, but just by the way he prayed,
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh, okay, that's something I should do." Right. So I think you just have to be open to that. And also, I think anytime you experience like pain or some sort of discomfort, and like pain doesn't have to be like a physical pain or like, oh my goodness, everything in life sucks and, I'm depressed or whatever, but you're going to experience some amount of discomfort at any point, and you have to decide if you're going to grow from it. And growth doesn't happen without pain or discomfort, right? Like anytime I had a growth spurt growing up, my legs would hurt like crazy. It would not be comfortable at all, but I was quite literally growing as a result. So I just think that, and so I think you have to kind of change your mindset a bit about, okay, this is not going to be comfortable. Like I am not an extroverted person. And so going into big groups of people where I don't really know anyone is terrifying, but also my mindset is, okay, well, you don't know anyone. You have to build a community and you can't do that unless you just go out and meet people. So
The Bible says,
like,
he who wants a friend, she who wants a friend must show herself friendly.
yeah. So, I mean, and it's not going to be comfortable, but when you're the new person somewhere, like, at least what I've realized from just moving different places is when you move to a place where relationships are already established, people have known each other for years. They're not necessarily looking for you or going to invite you in. You kind of have to like sneak your way in a little bit just because they have a full social circle. They don't necessarily need you the way you need them. So you kind of have to be the one to initiate and put yourself out there as uncomfortable as it is. But you end up getting some good relationships out of it if you're willing to put in the work, right?
Absolutely. And would you say that there's a growth spurt opportunity when it comes to finances too, when you relocate like that and then start to recalibrate and get your feet under you in a new place?
Yeah. Also, I had done the research out here, so I knew what the minimum salary I should ask for would be because I said, okay, if I'm going to move to California, I have to be able to afford to live there by myself. And also, I have to kind of recalibrate what I consider expensive
Mm.
because like I mentioned earlier, like for my 2-bedroom house with a yard and a garage by myself, I am paying less than I'm paying right now to share a 2-bedroom apartment that has one parking spot that goes with it. So like,
Welcome
and
to
no yard.
California, Mercedes. Welcome to California.
I know. And like for me, if I wanted to own a home in Michigan, it's so much more attainable than out here. I don't think I'll ever own out here. And so for me, I had to reset my expectations of, okay, what does living on my own look like out here? And also not being as surprised, like gas is more expensive. I think food is a bit more expensive. The car insurance went down, so that's nice. I think Michigan has one of the most expensive car insurance rates because we're a no fault state. And so that was a nice surprise. But my registering, because I drive a truck, registering my truck out here, unbelievable. Having to take a smog test and get my truck weighed and the registration fee, ridiculous. And so
Pros and cons, right? Pros and cons.
yes, pros and cons. And so I kind of had to recalibrate. Okay, this like for California, this is actually a good price, right? And so I had to kind of get over some of that sticker shock a bit. I still experience some sticker shock every now and again. I'll see a home like, oh, that looks like it could be an affordable home. I'll look it up on Zillow. Nope, that is not at all affordable.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
But that does bring me to this question. You literally came here. Thank you, Dad. No, thank you. I'll drive myself. You are a single woman in California, right?
Hmm.
A single professional building her career. You have a
Hmm.
single income.
Hmm.
How do you manage finances by yourself? Do you find it to be difficult? Do you find it to be challenging? Do you just find it to be what it is?
Well, for me, I've never known anything different. Like, I mean, obviously, once I moved out of my parents' house, like my parents were good parents. They provided for me growing up. But like, yeah, I just never knew any different. But even when I was a kid, my parents said, if you want something, you figure out a way to pay for it. And so I was like, oh, for me, the concept of just having to manage money, like having to budget wasn't a foreign concept to me. Investing was a foreign concept to me. So, and also how to save. Because for me, all I had thought of was get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt. Like that was my focus for so much of my 20s, right? I graduated with student loans and I was like, I just need to get rid of these student loans as quickly as possible. Right. And I remember at my last company, there had been layoffs. And quite literally, I was called into a meeting because I was a remote worker. And they said, anyone you see in this meeting still has a job. Anyone who you don't see got laid off. And I was like, oh, so I could have gotten laid off today. And if I had, I'd have been screwed. I remember talking to my friend and saying, dude, I just got so lucky. If I had lost my job today, I would only get 1 month severance and I don't have anything. And he said, okay, well, this is your opportunity now. Maybe this is a wake up call. So he actually helped me to like look over my finances and figure out, he said, you're 95% of the way there because you have a budget. You just need to change the way you allocate it. So instead of giving any extra money at the end of the month to your student loans, which is what I was doing, he said, you need to put some of that in savings because you should have somewhere between 3 and 6 months of salary saved up so that if something happens, you're good for 3 to 6 months. And so it was because of that shift in mindset of not only do I have to, like, I didn't realize how much risk I was assuming by not saving.
Right. You were being very normal. You were being very normal because most Americans don't even have 1 month cushion between life
Yes.
and their money.
And to be honest, it's hard, especially if you don't make a lot of money and you have a lot of living expenses. Sometimes it's everything you can do just to pay your bills, right? So sometimes saving can be a bit tricky. Um, and for me, you know, and I was so focused on just getting rid of debt, I thought I was doing the right thing. I was getting out of debt. That's always seen as a good thing, right? And also for me, it never occurred to me that I could lose my job just because a company decided to lay me off. I thought if I was going to lose my job, it'd have to be because I was bad at my job, you know? And so that was a wake up call to, oh, right. We're, well, like I, I work for companies that when they feel like it, they can just say, you no longer work here and they don't owe you an explanation.
At
And
will.
so, yeah, at will. And so that was a very scary thing to realize. And so thankfully it was because of that shift that enabled me to quit my previous job, knowing I had 5 months of cushion when I quit.
So I actually want to hover here for just a moment. In a recent podcast, the guest was talking about multiplication, and I'm hearing it again with your conversation with your friend. It took somebody else looking at your financial situation to say, you're doing a great job, but tweaking this one thing literally made a huge difference or could make a huge difference for your future. And you didn't know at that time that something was coming. right? That there
Yeah,
would be eventually, you would have an opportunity to just walk away from a job, right? But you wouldn't have that option to walk away from a job if you didn't have a 5-month cushion between you and life.
yeah.
So what would you say is the benefit of having another pair of eyes looking at your money situation? Was there a benefit to you for that?
Absolutely. But also, I think the important thing for me in that situation is this was a close friend who I trusted, right? And also, I remember when he offered to help me and to take a look at my finances, I remember saying the words you should have known, or how did you not know, or you're an engineer, you should do math better, cannot come out of your mouth. I don't want to hear any judgment. And he was like, no judgment, no judgment. And right? And so for
Yeah.
me, knowing, okay, this is someone I trust not to blab about my finances everywhere. This is someone that I trust to not judge me for what I did or did not know, and someone I trust to teach me. Like for me, that's what made the difference, right? Because I mean, and it's not that my parents wouldn't have taught me this stuff, but sometimes, it's easier to learn from someone else than from a family member. I think one time my dad tried to teach my mom how to golf, and it did not go well. She had to go to a separate instructor, even though they said the exact same things as my dad, just the way you receive it or the way you say it, whatever, it's different, right? So, but yeah, I think having an extra pair of eyes just because you don't know what you don't know.
And that you saw the benefit. You saw the value later
Yeah.
on, but you probably didn't know how much value that would have.
No, I didn't at the time.
Awesome. So we've talked about relocating, right? And we've talked about recalibrating with money, with church, with friends, right? With career. Uh, what does it look like to rebuild?
Yeah, so I think recalibrating and rebuilding are things that don't just happen once. So for me, I had to recalibrate, I had to rebuild both of those kind of simultaneously when I moved out here, right? I had to recalibrate what I saw as normal, right? So like in December, to me, what's normal is there is snow. Out here, I could still wear a t-shirt. And I remember thinking this is just the freakiest thing ever. But also I had to rebuild because I did not have any semblance of community out here. I came out here not knowing anyone, right? I think the only person I knew in Long Beach was my brother's mother-in-law's best friend from high school who's still out here, who was very kind.
That's a few degrees of separation.
Yes, yes, but she invited me to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas my first year here with her family, and that was super sweet, right? And that made the holidays here my first year like nice. It's also nice when it's other people's family drama and not your own. Then it's just entertaining and not stressful. A little over past the 1 year mark is when things started to very much shift for me. I got here in May, so the following September is when things started to change for me. And it started with that church group. So without getting too much into it, basically there were irreconcilable differences between me and a couple of the other leaders. And what I realized that and I realized there was no way we were ever going to be able to speak the same language. We kept talking past each other. And I realized that I wasn't getting what I needed from that group, but also from that church. I burned myself out. I was serving a lot and I wasn't getting filled like with the amount that was going out. So it was very unbalanced. And I, on my part, was bad at saying no. And so when everything happened, and I realized pretty quick that I needed to step away, I pulled the Irish goodbye because I didn't want to create division. I didn't want to cause gossip. I didn't want to talk bad about people, have people choose me or them or whatever. I said, it's easier to just quietly leave. But that was incredibly painful. It was very painful because that was the community I'd worked so hard over a year, a little more to build, and where I had thought I had found some semblance of belonging, right? And then not too long after that, in October, is when, that soccer team fizzled out. And so I went from having a pretty active social life to having basically no social life. But the timing was great because that's when work got super, super busy. So if there was ever a time for my social life to fall apart, like last fall was it, because then I was working some pretty crazy hours at work and I was like, well, I don't have time for a social life anyway. So That works.
Let me say something real quick about the fizzling out of friendships or a group.
Yeah.
This is something that I coach with finances. Sometimes we expect things to come easy or automatic, right?
Yeah.
You make a friend, this is going to be great. But the reality is, things take time. Even friendships, it takes time to learn people.
Yes.
Considering how you learned, I'm sure engineering was not just quick, like, oh my goodness, it's so easy, right? There were probably some
Yeah.
tests that you probably didn't do so well in, and you had to take them again. There were situations that you had to figure out and you didn't do so well and you had to repeat it, and you had opportunities to learn and grow. But oftentimes we create like an exception bubble with money, church, and friends. Like, no, it should. I heard something today. That should is a horrible word. Should
Oh,
sets us
it's
up for
terrible.
bad expectations. Yes. It literally sets us up for failure, because if we should, somebody else should, we should, the expectation is not actually communicated. When it doesn't line up, somebody gets upset, somebody gets disappointed. But the reality is, you shouldn't just stop trying. You shouldn't stop trying to make friends. You shouldn't stop trying to create a community just because the first attempt didn't work out. The first time you
No,
tried walking didn't work
absolutely.
out. Yeah. So how do you
No, and so
continue to rebuild?
yeah, so I think so I think it's I think there's an important distinction to make here as well, where yes, you got to keep trying with people, and you can't just say, okay, this is one bad thing happens and I'm out. I don't believe that's the right way to go. But I think you also need to know when to walk away.
Yes. Healthy.
Yeah, because I think at some point, things aren't a one-off instance. So what I noticed with this situation is I would bring something up and they'd say, okay, well, this was a one-off. And I said, no, this has happened too often for this to be a one-off scenario. This is now a repeatable pattern that can be observed. And I think that's one of the biggest things I learned from that church situation is that I didn't realize, and I don't know why I didn't realize this as a 32-year-old woman, like I have the power to walk away. I'm an adult. I don't have to stay somewhere that I don't want to stay. And so I realized like you always have the power to walk away. And walking away is not admitting defeat. All it is it's choosing to leave a situation that is no longer safe for you or is no longer good for you. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think now, for me, now I said, okay, I'm leaving this church. So now I'm going to have to rebuild. And when I remember thinking about it, I said, in terms of places to rebuild, this area is a really good place to rebuild because there's no shortage of options. So it's just finding, I don't know, I don't want to say like the right option, but I don't know, another good option, I guess. And so a friend from my old church knew someone who was organizing a beach day. And she said, hey, you want to come with me? This gal I know from playing pickleball, again with the pickleball, is throwing this beach bash. You want to come? It's going to be a lot of like Christians in their 20s and 30s. And I said, sure. And of course, she can't go. So I just show up and I'm like, I have no clue who I'm looking for. We'll see how this goes. And then that gal who organized that event kept planning events and I just kept showing up. And I didn't know where it was going to go. But out of that, I went to a worship night and a gal from there reached out to me last month and was like, hey, we're having another worship night. Would you like to come? And even just this last week, hey, I'm having a girls' night with some friends. You want to come? And I was like, sure. So for me, I didn't know what was going to come out of there, right? Some of those people I've only seen once and never again. Some of those people I saw the couple months that gal was planning get-togethers, and then I haven't seen since. But there's a couple people out of there that I have seen again, and maybe I'll see again some more. So I figure I'm just going to keep putting myself in positions where there's just an opportunity to meet someone.
I think that's awesome. And in the process, you're learning what you like and being reminded that you don't have to be in a situation you don't want to be in, right? You get to say yes, you get to say no. No, from what I'm gathering, you have several experiences in rebuilding, right? And you have an opportunity to not just say, hey, I want to get another community, but I'm going to use some of the lessons I learned from the first experience and the second experience to make this next experience even better. What would you tell people is one steps or lessons to rebuilding? And what is it that you want them to do?
So in terms of rebuilding, I think something I've learned. So for me, it's really important to feel understood. And so for me, I go to great pains to explain myself and make sure everyone understands exactly what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling, because I don't want them to misunderstand me. But I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in all of this is the attitude, let them.
Mm,
So let them. If someone is saying something that is uninformed and they're not open to correction, let them say whatever they want, because it's not worth my energy to prove them wrong or to prove myself right. And that is so hard. And it is incredibly hard for me as someone who really values being understood. And so just getting more comfortable with saying, whatever, man, like doing kind of this posture of like, all right, think what you want and it's not going to affect me. A lesson I've been learning that I learned a lot with that church group is I spent so much of my energy trying to help people. And that desire to help people, it's a good desire, right? And we're taught that sacrificing is loving, right? In a lot of different ways. But unchecked, it gives you this overconfidence, which I saw in myself, this overconfidence that they need the help way more than I do. And
mm,
so as a result, you don't get the care and support that you need because I wasn't getting the support I needed. And it ends up being just a really unhealthy form of self denial. So I think that's one of the things I've also had to learn. You know, people always say boundaries, boundaries, but honestly, boundaries are a really healthy and good thing. And saying no isn't necessarily mean. Saying no to someone isn't you saying, I don't care about you, but something I keep on being reminded of from various people is you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help someone put on theirs. For me, throughout these experiences, I think I've had to learn just to be better about listening to myself and what my own needs are. And sometimes what I need is to stay home in my pajamas and talk to absolutely no one and shut the world out. And it's beautiful.
loving and being kind. I think people forget starts with yourself.
Yes.
The Bible says to love the Lord, but it also says to love others as you love yourself. And often people forget the as you love yourself part. They leave that out and they don't first love themselves. Being
Yes.
kind to yourself means saying no to things that are harmful to you. And that is loving. It's not loving and it's not kind to be dishonest and to act as if, pretend, or try to convince yourself that you're okay with something that you're not really okay with. And I know that that can be very unhealthy. Dishonesty, I think, is the root of a lot of those things, right? Where you're
Yes.
not really, really being honest with yourself and saying, I don't like that. And I'm not taking care of me. I need to
Yes.
take care of me. And that's so important. And so I'm glad that you were able to get to the root of that and to love yourself. And the truth is, you deserve to be loved. You
Well,
are
thank you.
valuable.
And honestly, I think 'cause these are lessons that I know I've had to learn before, and I think these are lessons I'm inevitably going to have to learn again. So that's why I said like recalibrating and rebuilding. I feel like that's something that you're going to do over and over again throughout your life, whether it's because of circumstances beyond your control, like something drastic happens that you find yourself in a new place, or job changes or relationship changes or a family member ends up in the hospital for some reason and now you have to rethink, okay, so like what's going to happen now, right? So I think there's a lot of situations in life where you're going to find yourself rebuilding and recalibrating. That's actually one of the things that another leader and I fundamentally disagreed on. Was this leader really valued stability, and I think from what I understood of what they said, stability meant lack of change. When I don't think that's really the case. Like, have you ever seen those Indo boards? It's like a foam roller, and then it's almost like a paddle that you put on top of it. Or another one
Yes?
is like an exercise ball that's cut in half, and you put it so that the
Yeah.
round side is on the bottom, right? And you're trying to get your balance on those. So, right, like the whole point is like to stabilize yourself. Well, in order to achieve stability on those, you can't stop moving. You always have to be making all these little adjustments in order to keep your stability, right? As soon as you stop moving, that's when you're going to go down. And I think life is like that too. I don't think it's ever just stability means you're not moving or nothing's changing, nothing's happening. because that's just not the way life works. Things are always changing, things are always happening. So I think you just being able to make those adjustments to keep yourself stable is what matters.
It's going to shift as your home life needs something. Work is going to need to maybe take a dip. And as your work life needs something, home life will probably need to take a dip.
For
It's
sure.
not that it's supposed to be 50-50. And I think that's what you're saying about the stability. You actually are constantly adjusting. You are moving. Things in life are relocating
Yeah.
or just you're constantly recalibrating or rebuilding, recalibrate. Oh, that I did a little too much giving of myself. I said yes too much. Should have said no. And you're constantly doing a little bit of this until you find what works. And by the time you find what works, something shifts. And sometimes it's
Yes.
even your money too. Finances, you find yourself having to recalibrate with money. Right now, you're in the recalibration of investing, learning how to invest. You've gotten yourself out of debt.
Yep.
Now I've got some money. I'm not down to just a few $100s in my account. Now I'm at the stage where I can do something with that. What does that look like? So you're constantly doing a little bit of a shifting all the time and hopefully getting other people's eyes on relationships. I feel like everybody needs a relationship coach, a career coach, a financial coach, right?
Yes.
Because having somebody else's perspective is going to give you so much more foresight that you would not know. You don't know the roadblocks that are coming or the obstacles, and they can help you avoid them. So, what is it that you want people to take away from this? And do you have any last words for us?
I guess one more word is I would say it's nice to have multiple people kind of speaking to you about things because it's good to get more than one perspective, but also it's good to get different ages. Because if I only go to people who are in the same stage of life as me, that's
Yeah.
like the blind leading the blind in a lot of cases, my friends. So I have a really good friend that I talk to every week and I go to her for so much and but she's not the only one I go to, right? So I like talking to people who I always refer to them as church moms, people
Mm.
who are older than me, whether or not they're old enough to actually be my mom or old enough to be my mom. They're older than me. They have more experience. And it's nice because it's nice to talk to someone who's kind of like a mom, but without all of the baggage of being your actual mom. Not that my mom isn't amazing, she is. But sometimes there are some things that are a little bit easier to talk about with someone who's not your actual mom. And so I think it's important to get multiple perspectives, not on every single issue, but I think it's good to have a few key people to go to and not just only one and not ChatGPT. If you're using ChatGPT as your therapist, you need to stop. It is not a human. It's an algorithm trained by imperfect humans and it doesn't have the emotional intelligence. So don't use it as a therapist.
Mercedes says ChatGPT does not count as one of your therapists or
No,
advisors
no,
or moms.
no. It does not. It does not. And so yeah, but in terms of like what I would want people to take away is if there's something that you've been really wanting to do, but you've just been too scared to do, just try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So I think when I was thinking of leaving my first job after college to go to another job, and I was weighing the pros and cons, and I called my brother and I was like, okay, man, like in terms of the pros and cons list, there's an equal amount of pros and cons for both here. So what do I do? And he said, well, you can only fail forward. So just go for the new job because you might not like it, but that's information. And so, yeah, I would say just try something. When I quit my job, I knew I had 5 months of savings. I had no idea how long it would take me to find a job. And I remember just thinking, okay, God, I'm leaving. So you better be there to catch me. And for a long time, I was like, okay, God, I thought you were going to catch me. Why aren't you catching me? Why aren't you giving me a job? And a friend said, where does it say in the Bible that God promises you a job? He doesn't. He hasn't promised you any of that. So,
But he did provide for you.
and
Even
he
if it
did.
was through McDonald's substitute teaching, he
He
was
did.
still your provider and you still were taken care of.
He did. And like there was one day where I come home, look in my mail, there's an envelope with $1,000 cash in it. And I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
this is nice, right? And there was no like markings on it to tell me who put it there or anything. So I was like, and there was just a typed note in there that had my name on it, and it said, "You are loved. Please respect my desire to remain anonymous." And I was like, okay. I mean, I have to. I don't have a choice, but like, okay, I guess I'm not going to try to find out who you are. But like, God provides in really crazy ways.
Wow.
So,
But you can't say he was not your provider. He didn't give you a job when you wanted him to,
yeah,
right? You didn't rub the genie's belly and the genie just grants you your wish because God's
no.
not a genie. But he did provide for you however he saw fit right when you needed it.
Well, and
Isn't
also I
that
think
cool?
it's amazing. And I think also another thing to really keep in mind here when we're talking about jobs that I want to make sure people take away too is your job is not who you are. I used to go around saying
Mm.
I'm an engineer. And when I wasn't working as an engineer and people would ask like, what do you do or who are you? I had a whole identity crisis. I was like, well, I don't know what to say. Like I studied to be an engineer, but I'm not working as an engineer. So can I call myself an engineer? And I think what I had to learn through all of that, and maybe one of the things God wanted me to take out of that season is my identity first and foremost is as a daughter of God. So first and foremost, before anything else, I am a daughter of God. And also, God is my provider, not my job. If you're looking to your job for your stability and for your identity, that is a false idol. You will be disappointed every single time because I can tell you this, no company cares about you the way that God cares about you.
Can I throw something in there too, Mercedes?
Yes, please.
Your church isn't your identity, and neither is the amount of money in your bank account.
Absolutely.
None of those things are who you are. But sometimes we forget and we need to maybe relocate somewhere else, sunny
Yes.
California. We need to recalibrate our money, our community, our career, our church, small groups, our relationships. And then we ask God for an opportunity to rebuild and rebuild and recalibrate and rebuild again and again, knowing that we'll never get it perfectly. But His desire is for us to mature, not for us to be perfect. So thank you, Mercedes, for sharing with our listeners everything that you had to say, because I think all of it was very, very impactful. So I do have something to tell our listeners. It is so important that you take a moment, not just to listen to everything that we just talked about, but to take one action, one small step, one seed planted, because that's how transformation begins. I am Antifoluca with Hand in Hand Consulting. Today, plan tomorrow.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the biggest lessons I learned before moving out here. Whatever other people say, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's only one man who determines my worth. He died on a cross 2,000 years ago. So, like, whatever anyone else says just doesn't matter.
Audience of one.
Yes.